So, okay, we are now officially recording this. And here is the agenda for today. Also remember to sign in here at the top. I'll add a couple of these so it's easier. Cool. Add any other topics I'm missing. I think we have a pretty short agenda today, especially without Jordan here. Last week, Jordan presented on his malware analysis project for PyPy, and also got a bunch of other people working on similar things interested and excited on Twitter, and then invited them to today's meeting to chat about their projects. So I figured we would start out with that. Anybody here that is new and interested in the malware analysis and malware detection stuff, it's just to introduce themselves and talk about what you're working on. So I think there's at least a couple people. Anybody want to start?
I don't mind.
Awesome. Go for it.
So, yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Mansfield. I work in a company called Castle. We do account takeover prevention. I also do a lot of security work related, to security for Rubygem's organization, and I'm one of the security advisors there. And I built a platform called Defend, which is kind of running alongside Rubygems, and the only reason is I'm just too lazy to integrate it with Rubygems directly, because it's kind of a big of a mess, to be honest. And I've been doing exactly almost the same work as Jordan, but for Ruby. It turns out after I've read his article that we kind of use a similar technology stack, and yeah, that's why I'm here on behalf of Castle, Defend, and Rubygems.org.
Awesome. Do you have a link to the
yeah,
stuff somewhere we could drop in?
Do you still not have access to the doc? It should be public, but if you want to send me your email, address.
Yeah, I did request an access, though I still don't have it. And yeah, no, still read only for me.
Let me see. Right. Yeah, we have it shared with this Google group for edit, and then it's publicly visible though. So if you join this, or we can add you directly to the doc. Either way. Cool. So how exactly does Defend work? You said it's similar to Jordan's.
Well, what Jordan basically does is he, based on my understanding, he uses TCP dump with a couple other things to track I/O and I/O operations and network traffic upon install. I've been doing something similar, but thanks to some friends initially at Rubygems, I've got a database with historical stuff with all of the young libraries versions, so I had a broader scope of things to work with, and thanks to that, we came up with not only the behavior analysis, but also with an engine for static analysis that kind of diffs the changes in coding between releases and tries to pinpoint things that are malicious. Not everything can be caught with running an install. I don't exactly know how it works with Python and how complex the ecosystem is, but for Rubygems, it basically sucks. It is designed to be friendly, which quite often means it is also easy to be abused. And because of that, not always tracking the network traffic upon install is enough. Me and a couple other people involved came up with this idea of a whole sandbox for Ruby, where we install gems, we run them within a ecosystem of things like Rails, and then we track the behaviors. Still not enough, because some of the attacks are actually designed to work, for example, only on Windows, only in particular cases. And then it's really, really hard to come up with all of the combinations of all of the Ruby versions, Rails versions, operating systems, and so on. But I would say we were quite successful, especially this year, in catching things, including non-malicious stuff like leaked tokens and data like that. So what Diffin does, it assigns risk scores based on particular signals, and then if the overall risk score is above certain threshold, it pings me and folks from Rubygem. So we do the same for the quality of the ecosystem. We track things that aren't of a security concern, but they are just low quality stuff related to how you publish Ruby packages, and it also allows us. We're working on building a system for opening issues on GitHub to maintainers that, hey, you're doing something you probably shouldn't, or you're publishing like 0.5 gigabyte of development files. It's probably not what you intended when you decided to release a gem. So more or less, it works that way. Dan, you're muted. I see you speaking, but you're muted.
Sorry, thanks. I was asking if you have a link to any reports or data that you've published on things that you found with Defend this year, or is it all kind of private embargoed?
I sometimes tweet a bit. Some of the things, well, not all of the things get CVEs. Mostly they don't get CVEs because I'm quite fast in tracking those things. People from Rubygems have access to the system. So whenever something is found really fast, we just yank the versions. There weren't any, I am not aware of, maybe there are really big things in couple last months related to Rubygems. There were a couple gems that are just research gems. They do steal data, but the data isn't confidential. It's like a list of the files in home directory and things like that. And by design, Rubygems tends not to remove things like that out of the system. There is a problem though with a lot of gems sending weird requests, doing nothing except just sending them. Probably for analytics, there are companies like UpSignal that send requests when you install the gem, which I think is unfair. You shouldn't do it, but they download something. I haven't had time to dig into what exactly is being downloaded. It's definitely nothing malicious, but things like that happen. And I do see a couple more gems that are widely used that download external dependencies upon install or first execution from the internet. So yeah, we have an internal discussion on how to deal with that with any future gems that would want to do stuff like that.
Interesting.
You can watch my presentation from I think it was 1 year ago or 2 years ago at Ruby Kaigi in Japan. I had a whole presentation on how you can use public data that is being published by Rubygems to pinpoint the gems that you would want to take over and how you can inject things into them.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you have any more data on the risk score piece? That sounds like something that could be interesting, especially when we talk about other programming languages and ecosystems.
Well, if you go to my.diffent.io, you can check the code difference in between gem versions. And based on that, I use static analysis to pinpoint things. I look for certain characteristics based on older attacks. I don't think all of this can be adapted to other languages because some of the things are kind of specific. What I noticed when I was working with JavaScript is that people kind of publish precompiled versions of code, and that kind of makes it really problematic to pinpoint weird stuff. What else? I would probably have to prepare. I just 5 minutes ago came home, and I noticed the messages, so I'm not really prepared. But there are a couple other signals. So yeah, what other folks do, I think I do it. Yeah, is with a bit more. Yeah. But in general, we do have the platform for design for Rubygems for analyzing every single gem version that is being released and scoring it, as I said, both from the quality and security perspective. We had a discussion about introducing something like a sandbox, but because of how Rubygems and Bundler are designed, it would be really problematic for the community because of like chain of dependencies. You let's say you decide to release something like Rails, and then the system kind of halts one of the gems, and then it is not well handled by Bundler itself. So Bundler is a package manager for Ruby, for people that don't know.
I have a couple questions for you. First of all, you mentioned things don't get CVEs. Do they at least get noted in Bundler audit, or you're just yanking and hoping everything else goes from there?
We're yanking.
Yeah. Okay. So you don't report CVs and you don't report to Bundle audit. Generally, just yanking.
Well, to be honest, my experience with reporting CVs is that I reported one at the end of last year. It still hangs as a pending something. I pinged them again, and they changed the status. It's still like hanging. And to be honest, I'm not that interested in. I am interested in CVs, but for me, it's not user friendly. And it, I submitted it. I waited a couple months. I pinged them again. They changed the status from something to something else. It's still not published. It doesn't bring a lot of value to me if the compromised gem is not popular. It, let's say, had a couple hundred downloads, and the worst scenario that could happen with it is Bitcoin mining. Then it just gets yanked.
Okay, what about Bundler audit? Because Bundler has an auditing system built in that reports not just CVEs but other things. Do you report to them either, or you just yank on Rubygems and call it a day?
I do yank. I didn't know though that Bundler audit works with things that aren't official CVEs. So
I don't know. Although historically they did. Maybe they only do CVEs now, but they used to do other than CVEs.
As far as I recall, they have scripts for syncing with some of the sources of CVEs and the GitHub security audit reports. Those are the two sources that are like semi-automatic if it goes about Bundler audit.
Yeah, they presented in another working group the Bundler audit database, and I think they mentioned a couple of problems with CVEs that are kind of similar to the ones you mentioned, where they found a bunch of typo squatting packages, for example, and the CVEs, by definition, didn't want to. The CVEs didn't want to publish CVEs for those because they're not vulnerabilities; they're malicious by design, which is, I guess, not a vulnerability. So it kind of fits into this gray area where.
Yeah, and my opinion about Bundler audit, there are things that aren't updated. For example, if you look at Ruby CVEs, they quite often don't get this, the default score that CVE organization assigns. Right. Those aren't populated to Bundler audit because there's just no one doing it. So for really popular gems, I would say they're gonna hit Bundler audit, but for things that are in the gray area, like you said, they're probably not gonna get there. And one thing about bundler audit is it runs too late. People tend to add gems, they run bundle install, and then that's more than enough to do harm. And before it hits bundler audit on CI or something like that, that's definitely too late. And that's a second part of things that we built with Defend is a plugin that you plug into bundler, and it actually prohibits you from downloading. You can just set up rules that all of the things need to obey. Like, hey, you're not supposed to install gems that are younger than a month. You're not supposed to do this and that. And we use it in Castle to basically guide all of the company developers on how things are supposed to be when it comes to using the open source dependencies, even downloading them, and yeah.
Yeah, the problem with saying never download less than a month old means that if there's an important security patch, that doesn't get updated either.
Never download, never use a new gem, not a version. And obviously you can buy
new gem.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, no, you can configure stuff, so it is flexible. If you need to override things, you can do it, but there's definitely a footprint. Who decided to do that? Why and when, and stuff like that. So it allows us to manage dependencies and manage outdated dependencies. There's so many libraries that are abandoned, and using them not always the best idea. So we kind of do spend a bit of time on securing especially our backend ecosystems due to the type of the company in which I work.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for talking about all of this stuff. It's definitely pretty similar to the work that Jordan had started on.
Yeah, told you. There's nothing, there's just nothing special about Ruby as a language compared to Python or the other way around. It's just about, in my opinion, understanding the ecosystem and how you can abuse it, and then coming up with countermeasures that are or are not specific to a given technology. Though Ruby sucks in terms of what you can do with packages.
Well, in some sense, Ruby may be easier because if I recall correctly, although you're not supposed to do a lot while you install a Ruby gem, whereas in Python, in order to install it all, you have to run a program. So while the languages are very, very similar, that does seem like a difference you can exploit.
In Ruby, you can, when you install a gem, you get full control of the process in which it is being executed. So
yeah, right. But how often is that capability actually used?
It really depends. For attacks, I would have to check it. But for legit gems, it's being used quite often. Every single native extension that comes with Ruby needs this. Every company that wants to download something from internet, like linked libraries or any other stuff, uses it. So I in terms of network activities on a daily basis, let me look into statistics.
Right,
to give you an example.
I'm contrasting this with Python, though, which is you always run code. There's no exceptions. Whereas in Ruby, at least, a normally behaving Ruby package, Ruby gem, typically doesn't need unless it's got C extensions. And I don't know, you would know better than I would what the percentages are, but I would expect most Ruby gems to not run code during install.
95% of daily releases shouldn't run any code during install.
That's what I expect. And I would contrast this with Python, where you have to run code. That's how it works, which makes it more complex.
Yesterday, there was over 800 packages releases, 846 releases. if you give me a couple of minutes, I can give you an exact number of how many of them have network traffic. But okay, I didn't know that about Python. I just thought that it is kind of similar, that things get downloaded, they get extracted, and they're there.
Yeah, so you mentioned you're running this alongside Rubygem. Does that mean you're just kind of hosting all the infrastructure yourself?
Yeah.
Fun.
It's $45 a month, so I can afford that. Let's say I can afford that. It is. It started as a research project, and I have a lot of fun working on it, and it kind of aligns with the company policies in the company in which I work, and because they do invest a lot of money into both. The open source that I built, I was actually hired in Castle because I did open source that Castle was using before I joined the company. And the same with my security work. So I'm really privileged in that regards.
Awesome. And I think Jordan's is a little bit more expensive, but that's probably because he was doing a one-time big analysis to catch up on everything. I'm sure it wouldn't be as bad to keep it running.
Wasn't Jordan, this seems like similar in spirit that it's trying to catch malicious code in package updates, but wasn't Jordan's project running it wasn't doing the static analysis so much as it was just running the thing and then monitoring the syscalls?
So as far as I saw, it was running the install process only without running the execution. Right. So we have for Ruby, we have a sandbox that, as I said, runs things, installs stuff, tracks the activities, and then alongside as a separate tracking engine, it tries to run the libraries within like Linux, couple Ruby versions, couple Rails versions, and then it tries to pinpoint gems that would misbehave. And alongside that, there's the static analysis,
And then you're doing the same thing that Jordan was doing, like monitoring the syscalls as you're running the thing, as you're installing and running the thing. I'm curious about the second part though, because like installing it is straightforward because it's a common entry point, like you know how to install a package. But how do you run a library? I mean, I understand how you would, if it has a main, you run the program, but a library, how do you enter and exercise its functionality?
By run, I mean, I do require it. So I load all of it into the ecosystem. What I noticed analyzing older attacks on Ruby gems, that quite often they inject something that is Rails-based or based on a production environment, and then it kind of waits a random amount of time and it clicks in. So if you unless it crashes, because many Ruby gems are actually designed to be private gems. People tend to publish things that only they use, so they don't define dependencies, stuff like that. But for publicly available gems, they shouldn't break when you require them, and they shouldn't present any weird behaviors. And so I try to require it, which would load all of the code. I track syscalls, number of threads, network traffic without Rails, and the same with Rails. And then with Rails, I kind of emulate a typical web server that would have some calls, internal calls within Docker, and things like that to pinpoint, to kind of try to emulate what a normal application looks like.
So you're not like, fuzzing it or looking through the functions and calling those. You're really just importing it and seeing if it sets up any kind of crazy behavior at import time. I see.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it's more than import time. You import it and then you run a regular Rails app and see, for example, if it's been subverted in some weird way. Yeah.
The only thing that I didn't, that I wasn't able to do is to figure out to snapshot the Ruby AST before I load the library and after I load it for the code, because then I would be able to track like hooks to things like TCP methods or HTTP and stuff like that. But Ruby AST is not the most friendly thing. I am working on it though, because majority of the libraries shouldn't modify things that aren't of their scope. Some probably will, so it's just going to be one additional signal. but I would expect majority of libraries to kind of encapsulate their own logic within their own library namespace.
Okay.
Cool.
Obviously, that's not going to catch every possible attack, but if it catches some, that's an improvement over the current state.
Well, I never said I would be able to catch everything. I still believe that being strict with what is allowed within a company is much better countermeasure for majority of the things. One thing that I can add on top of this, I was able to, and we're finishing this work. We're connecting Castle. If you go to castle.io, you're gonna see how it works. We're connecting Castle to Rubygems to provide account takeover tracking. So Rubygems team will be notified about potentially any attempts of stealing the accounts or publishing gems on behalf of someone else. We had a really good commercial success with companies like Rockstar and Atlassian. So we hope it's gonna help Rubygems in general Ruby community.
Awesome. I think Martin, you're also here, right? You also
Yes.
are working on something similar for Python?
Yes, indeed. Hello, my name is Martin Karnogurski, and I am a security researcher doing mostly forensic analysis, OSINT reconnaissance, and similar kind of stuff. And at the same time, I'm also a Python developer. So I've been thinking about creating or addressing the problem of malware in Python because that was over the news a lot recently. And I started looking at some tools that exist or that can be used for that. But unfortunately, to my research, I didn't really find anything suitable there. There was a lot of problem in existing SaaS tools to do this on large scale. So I decided to create my own static analyzer called Aura. And my goal is basically to periodically or even in future in real time to audit what's being uploaded to PP. So I build these static analyzers. There is a big difference between what exists like the Bandit. So normally when there is a SaaS tool, it tries to produce some alerting for developers, and it aims to do with a low false positive ratio and something that's actionable. But I took a completely different approach. So I mostly look for some behavior of the code, anomalies, and similar kind of stuff. So you can get alerts. For example, this piece of code is doing network communication. This is accessing files on the file system. This is doing some system execution commands, which is not actionable by developer, but can be used. It's very helpful when doing some auditing on the source code. So what I did, I have a Synology NAS server at home where I created offline repository of PP that is periodically being synced to the main repository, and I scan whatever is being uploaded there using Aura. So it gets the packages, it recursively unpacks it, and it scans all Python files inside there using more or less universal AST parser, which is one of the issues that I identified with other tools, because they usually can only parse Python source code and the Python installation they were installed, like Bandit, Koala, etc. So it scans that. There are then AST analyzers that looks for pattern matching. So they look whether there are some network communication, even some vulnerabilities, so it's able to detect if there is some kind of SQL query using string formatting, which can lead to SQL injection, and pick up those anomalies that are being reported. There is also an extension to this, so Aura is able to also analyze non-Python files, so it gets a raw file and it's able to run some analyzers on top of that, like Yara, Beanvolk. If it's executable, it tries to disassemble that and look what the executable is doing. If it's a compiled Python source code, it tries to look at if it's reproducible, if it wasn't changed by injecting some malicious payload inside, something similar to what reproducible builds are doing. And basically, in this sense, the Aura is a like data analysis pipeline. On top of that, I also, since I mentioned reproducible builds, there's a project associated to that called Diffoscope. So I took that as an inspiration to create also a diffing engine on top of Python files. So if there is, for example, a GitHub repository where the Python package is hosted and uploaded package on the repository, it's trying to diff if there are any differences between those two locations of the source code. Because in past I saw that there was some package uploaded on PP that had malicious payload, stealing, I think it was SSH credentials and certificates, but it was not in the GitHub repository. So it's trying to audit this in a similar manner that the Diffoscope is doing. But I also integrated it with the SAST analyzer. So you don't only get this raw diff, where you see like this code change or there is this new file like in Git, but it's also able to diff the detections that the SAS was able to detect. So you can see that previously this code wasn't doing any network communication, but now it's doing network communication and executing some system commands. So you get this high-level overview of what actually happened in there.
It's really cool. I wrote a blog post a while ago, I guess, on the same thing you just talked about, where PyPy shows you the GitHub repo where something supposedly came from, but there's no actual proof or verification or anything like that. So anybody can kind of mess with the code in between. So if you don't actually look at what was uploaded, you might not be looking at the right thing.
Yeah. And this is actually one of the, this is one of the main things I'm very concerned about right now, because the standard pitch for open source is, hey, anyone can review it. Well, anyone can review some source code, but there's nobody's checking if the source code and the actual thing people execute are related.
Exactly.
So it kind of makes the whole reviewing thing moot. Now, you mentioned there's something else that is checking if the Python packages are reproducible. Is that something else? It's two different issues. There's the package, and then there's the execution results. From the package point of view, was that some other group? That's a group I'm not familiar with. I want to know more.
Kind of. So I identified a couple of anomalies that are worth looking at. So one is it's still work in progress, these reproducible builds. So I'm trying to match whether if there is some Python packages have precompiled code, bytecode. So I'm trying to track whether it can be reproduced when the original Python source code is.
But you're doing that yourself. That's not some other project that you're building on.
It's part of the Aura project. It's doing that automatically.
Okay.
So it's not a manual process. It's a part of that pipeline. So that's one thing. And the other is reproducing the Python packages itself. So there are a couple of interesting indicators. For example, Python packages contain manifests of what is actually inside the package, the checksum, etc. But when I started matching that to what actually is inside the Python package, I found, for example, that the MD5 declared of that file is different than what is actually inside. So I'm trying also to look in this reproducibility or indications that some Python package might have been manually edited by, for example, unzipping the archive, replacing the file, and then zipping it again and uploading the pipeline.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I would love to see that baked into IPI somewhere, where they whine and complain if you try to even upload such a thing. What do you mean? I can't reproduce that.
My philosophy is also that I've been doing this for the last 3 or 4 years, doing the scanning of PP repositories, but it was mostly a private research. I was telling to myself I will release it once I feel like it's ready, but it's never ready, so I decided recently to release it. And my philosophy is that all the data that I collected by scanning the whole PyPy repository is released open source on the internet, so anyone can actually download a huge JSON data set. It's around 60 gigabytes of data, and it's raw results, and you can start looking at these kind of differences and anomalies that were found there.
How often were the packages not reproducible? Is that very unusual?
Actually, it was majority of the cases, I would say.
Oh, so right now, very few things are reproducible. Okay.
Yes. There are also, I identified some like vectors that can be used. So for example, nowadays, a lot of developers are aware that it's not a very good idea to actually commit some secrets to the Git repository, or even if it's deleted, you can still see it in commits, or if you have some file called passwords.txt, it might end up in Git. But I saw a lot of this stuff in the Python packages, which behave similarly to Git. It actually collects all the files and put inside there, but nobody's checking what is inside. So oftentimes I see leaked credentials using PyPy-RC configuration file, and you can hijack the user. I found some high severity incidents like that, where I was able to, if I were a threat actor, to hijack very popular Python packages, including Peel, Sticky, etc., that have thousands of installations every day, just because there was a file included that was leaking the credentials to the author or maintainer of the project.
Wow.
I've seen exactly something like that 5 days ago with Ruby. It's the same case. People don't look what they actually add to the packages when they build them. And yeah, it happens that there are credentials for some sort of APIs for which they were building library. And yeah, common case.
I know GitHub and a bunch of other things have scanning automatically to notify you if something looks like a password or a certificate or a credential. I wonder if PyPy and Rubygems could use something like that to warn the person automatically.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's easy win to also include something like that by default.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we have anybody from the PyPy or Rubygems teams here, though, to see if they've talked about that already.
No, but it wouldn't be hard to contact them.
Yeah. We had some people here last time. I guess they're just not here today.
Yeah. But I don't think either teams are large, so it won't be hard to contact them all.
I mean, Rubygems does not have a lot of resources. That's one of the problems about Ruby community. It's an advantage and it's a disadvantage as well. That it's not commercial, right? So if there's a development happening, it's usually a non-commercial one. It's open source. Do it, basically. Attitude, and I think that's for Rubygems, that's the biggest problem. That there's just not enough resources, and even if you look into Bundler, there's so many things that could be done better, could be fixed or improved, but there's just not enough people that would be willing to do this work.
I would argue that PyPy is in a similar situation. It has some resources, but not a lot.
Yeah, how does Rubygems get posted? Is somebody donating? Does anybody know?
There's a Ruby Together organization that collects money from bigger Ruby companies, and I think there's at the moment one person working more or less full time on Rubygems improvements, and there's like a whole bunch of folks like me doing some sort of work either within Rubygems directly or somewhere alongside.
Cool. Yeah, and I believe
just a note. I see that in the document there is mention of the div using dynamic execution results, but just to clarify, the Aura is using only static analysis, so there is zero code execution.
Oh, so Aura is purely static. Cool.
Yeah. There are some like advanced deobfuscation techniques. I mostly use what compilers are using to optimize the source code. So it's rewriting AST3 by, for example, propagating constants, folding of the nodes, etc. But it was designed from the ground up for zero execution. So that's also the main difference with Jordan's approach.
Well, Wait a minute. There's how are you installing the Python packages in the first place? Because if I recall correctly, setup.py, I mean, it's a Python program.
It's not installing it at all. It's just there is this generic data pipeline where it determines what the file is, like it's a Python package because it's a tarball file or something. Then if it sees that it's an archive, it unpacks it. It looks at is there Python source code inside, setup.py? If so, then it's analyzed that using static analysis, so it's able to extract what is the package name. There is also some metadata coming from PP because it's connected to the PyPy repository, so it's able to also pick some information there. But it's mostly in this like recursive approach. When it sees an archive, it unpacks it, and whatever files are inside, it adds that to the pipeline and then run through the same process again.
Cool.
So you're intentionally trying hard not to run code at all.
Yes, my assumption is there could be some malicious installed inside.
Yeah.
Well, he's running it on his network access storage, so.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, the interesting challenge there is I wonder how many packages don't work well because they're assuming you are running code. It's not too
sorry,
bad.
could you rephrase the question?
A lot of Python packages, if I recall correctly, on install run Python code. So if it's conventionally enough, I mean, maybe you're static. I guess the question is, does that cause many problems? I guess the answer is no.
I'm not sure if I understand correctly because like the run Python code is usually part of the setup.p, but right. Officially that's long deprecated because the new wheels that are already here on several of years, the RFC or the PEP discourages of any execution during the installation, but sometimes it's inside, but usually that's just populating some metadata inside the repository for like the pip, so it's able to track like which files belongs to which packages or what's the author or package name. Sometimes these packages do like install time dependency, so they might be downloading something from the internet, like some data set, if it's ML framework or something like that. So of course, in these cases, it wouldn't work. But on the other hand, my auditing flags that as network communication being done during the setup process.
Cool. So Jordan left us an update on his project in Slack. I put a link to it here in the doc, but the basic summary is that I've been helping him find some resources to keep this thing running and then get it hooked up to PyPI so it can run continuously. We've got a GCP project set up that he and I have been starting to move the code over to. If anybody wants to help out with that, feel free to reach out. Jordan's repo is linked in there too, where the code runs and everything. It was pretty easy to get up and running. Definitely reach out if anybody wants to help. Jenny, I saw that you had a topic under next that I forgot to copy down, and then you resolved it. Comment. Did you still want to talk about that one today? That's about the census stuff.
I tried pinging her on Slack. Oh, there she is. Yay.
Sorry. Yeah, here I am. Sorry. It always takes me a second to find the unmute button. No, I thought that was an older. I thought that was an older comment.
Okay, cool. I wasn't quite sure either.
I added that one. That was our discussion on some people, like from the Harvard research, that some folks were asking about some data that was lower in the stack. So we had talked about like we could even start with just the developer survey as one idea to try to get some of that data. So that was just meant to be like an open discussion on that. So I don't know what we want to talk about today or save it for a later time.
I probably want to save it for a later time. I know that Frank had looked into that a little bit. It was related. Now it's coming back to me. It was related to the email you sent him. Frank's going to be coming back later in the year, okay. And I think he'd be able to speak a little better to that than I would.
Okay, awesome.
Cool. Okay, were you going to say something?
Yeah, not about that. I had a different question if now's the time. And
Sure.
I'm sorry I didn't put it on the agenda, but two questions. So one is I know that there's been some discussion of trying to do some fundraising to help with securing critical projects. And I thought I'd just see if there's a status on that or if that's something that's being discussed openly in this group. Maybe it's being discussed privately at this point, in which case I'm sharing information.
No, I don't think anything's private or anything. Yeah, it's one of the main reasons this group exists, is to help try to find those projects that only have one person maintaining them in their spare time, and getting them resources. Were you talking about maybe making a formal call for fundraising or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know any status on that, or what that would look like. Could you explain a little more, I guess, like putting together some kind of call for money, I guess?
Yeah, I just thought that might be happening, but if it's not, at some point, I think we do want to do that, and we also, while we're not currently we're not raising money through membership dues. We will be doing that starting at the end of next year. So we should, figure out how we increase membership dues, and in the meantime, if we want to do some call for fundraising. But it sounds like we haven't got that far yet in the thinking for this group, and that's fine. I just was checking to see.
Yeah, I mean, on the Google side, we've been doing a few one-offs to support some efforts. But I think if people in the room are needing resources and think this group could be helpful, put it in the doc, reach out, let us know, and maybe we can collectively come up with a good plan together to figure out how to help out.
Okay. And then the other thing, I believe I saw somewhere a list of what I'm wondering is if we've done and again, maybe I missed this, but kind of what we think are the most critical projects, some sort of analysis on that. I think what I saw most recently was kind of for each of the packaging ecosystems, the most commonly used packages in that ecosystem. So I think there was top 200 Python packages, top 200 JavaScript packages, etc. So I guess I'm just wondering if we've got, or if we're thinking that we'll get more formal about which are the projects that, if we had resources coming in, we'd want to tackle those first.
So yeah, there's a few. So we have the Harvard data, of course, and then there's another project that was started called the Criticality Score to complement whatever we do here. That's just taking a stab at looking at different heuristics and then stack ranking projects. So we can drop a link on that for that in this in the notes doc. But definitely open for for ideas how we could do that. If we could start with 5 projects that the industry thinks are really important and agree on those, or I think we're open to more ideas and suggestions there.
Okay, and that Criticality Project, that's something that's happening out of this group, or is it happening somewhere else? Okay. Okay, great. Thanks. Sorry, I've been wanting to attend these meetings and have had conflicts for the last couple, so my questions are just catch up.
No worries. Cool. Any other topics people want to discuss today? No? Cool. I'm not sure if we will have the next meeting yet. When is it? 17th. I don't know. I guess we'll discuss offline, and if there's enough stuff on the agenda, I'll be around and we can still chat. But if too many folks are on vacation mode already, then we can just cancel that. So look out for that. I'll cancel it on the calendar if we decide to kill it. Cool. Someone just pasted a link to something. Oh, Python data sets. Oh yeah, cool. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Bye.
Thank you.